Hey, Jared here from Sound Guitar Lessons. This is a very special lesson because I have a guest teacher who's going to teach you about jazz guitar counterpoint. A friend of mine, a colleague, Ronan Delisle. He's a fantastic guitar player. He's very knowledgeable about jazz. If you like his teaching and you like this lesson, I'll put a link to his channel in the description. Please welcome Ronan Delisle teaching about jazz counterpoint, and I'll see you in another video soon, and I'll be back next week with another lesson.
My good friend Jared asked me to come talk to you guys today about jazz guitar counterpoint and inner harmonic motion, a topic that I'm really passionate about and plays a large role in my own personal style. Jared and I go way back, so it's really a privilege to be a guest on his channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and check out the gold mine of videos that's here on this channel. If you enjoy what you see today, I encourage you to subscribe to this channel and to my channel, Beauty is a Rare Thing. My goal with this video is to help you understand the basics of counterpoint and how to apply it to jazz improvisation. Counterpoint can be a bit of a dense subject at first, so if you don't have a thorough understanding of diatonic harmony, functional harmony, intervals, secondary dominance, that type of thing, it might be worth your while to go check out some resources so that you have a firm grasp of these ideas before moving on. Now, with that said, let's move on to defining the 4 different types of contrapuntal motion. In the context of counterpoint, I'll be using the term voices instead of notes, or at least using it interchangeably with the word notes. What I mean is, when I have 2 notes that are moving in any given direction, I'll refer to them as voices. The idea of voices or a choir is integral to the study of counterpoint because a lot of these rules and tendencies come from vocal music or choral music. Thus, when I'm talking about 2 notes or 3 notes, I'll be talking about something that has 2 voices or 3 voices. A piece written for a choir that uses SATB or soprano, alto, tenor, bass is written for 4 voices. Those voices can split off and become voices within themselves, but generally speaking, 4 voices is the style for choir. The piano can play multiple voices at a time, as can the guitar, but instruments like the violin or the cello or the double bass or the saxophone or trumpet are more limited to monophonic textures, which means just playing one line at a time. Simply put, the word voice is just a fancy way of saying note, while also implying that there's a trajectory and a story to this voice that's going to expand and develop over time. The first motion we'll be talking about is oblique motion. This is when there's a fixed pitch that is not moving, and the second voice is moving either below or above it. Parallel motion is one of the more common contrapuntal textures that we encounter in music, and it's when 2 notes or 2 voices are moving in parallel harmony. That means in the same direction at the same interval or rate. A common texture is parallel thirds or parallel sixths, all of which you'll encounter in like pop vocal harmonies often. And that means that there's a melody harmonized with a third below it diatonically, moving at the exact same rate. So if the top voice moves up by a whole step, so does the bottom voice. They mirror each other perfectly. Contrary motion is when 2 voices are moving in opposite directions. They don't have to be at the same rate, it just has to be opposite. A top note, for instance, can be moving up, and a bottom voice can be moving down. That's opposite. Or it could be flipped. The top note could be going down, while the bottom note can be going up. This creates interesting situations where there's a sense of expansion when they're moving away from each other, or a really fascinating sense of contraction when they're moving towards each other and sometimes cross. Similar motion is when 2 notes are moving in the same direction, but not necessarily at the same rate. It's related to parallel motion, but it's a little bit less strict in the sense that one voice can move by a certain interval and the other one doesn't have to necessarily match that. It just has to match the direction. If I have a note that moves up by a perfect fifth, the bottom note can go in the same direction, but maybe just by a whole step or by a third and still be considered similar motion. These contrapuntal motions can be combined together to create incredibly rich textures. I highly recommend digging into the vocal chorales by J.S. Bach, which are masterworks of this 4-part contrapuntal style. I define these contrapuntal motions as two-voice relationships, but we can combine these, and you'll find this in the chorales, where we can combine contrapuntal motion with oblique motion, or similar motion with parallel motion. And that's how we yield these extremely rich contrapuntal textures. We're going to keep it simple today with just 2-part lines, and you'll see that even that can yield some really beautiful results. Now that we have our definitions squared away, let's jump in and see how we can apply these ideas to jazz harmony and improvisation. Also, as a little side note, I'm using a pick and fingers, but you can use just fingers, or if you need to split up these notes between 2 pick strokes, you can also do that. Johnny Smith, the great guitarist, didn't use fingers at all, and he had a beautiful contrapuntal style, but he would alternate very quickly between pick strokes to give the illusion of 2 notes being played at the same time. All that to say, wherever you're coming from as far as right hand technique, you'll be able to make these examples work today, even if it's not exactly how I'm playing them. We're going to take a look at examples that I've composed for each of these 4 contrapuntal motions of what it might look like to improvise with these styles in mind. I've compiled all of these examples into a free PDF that you can download so that if this moves a little too quickly, you can slow down and just read the PDF. Some of these may be quick to get under your fingers, but others may take more time. So there's really no shame in taking your time and slowing down and making sure that you understand the contrapuntal ideas behind some of these lines. I'm going to share with you one example over a 2-5-1 for each contrapuntal motion. We're going to start with oblique motion. This little phrase goes like this. I'm going to have my pinky here on the G, and then the rest of my fingers are going to be free to move about the position in this way. So we're going to start with, and it's oblique motion because this is going to be sustained throughout. And that provides the counterpoint there. The top note and this answer that's happening in the lower voice. And I might decorate the higher voice with something like this. Or just to really drive home the point to the ear that this is 2 separate things happening. You could easily adapt this to minor by altering the notes to fit the minor scale. Now that you have this under your fingers, let's try this with some accompaniment. Let's try it now in minor. I'm going to pull up another groove just to show you how we can adapt this to a different groove or different rhythm so it's not always just straight 8th notes. So I'm just varying the 8th notes there. Hopefully that gives you an idea of how you might use some oblique motion over a 2-5-1. If you want to keep practicing this on your own, I recommend just finding a position to work in and finding a tonality. Like, let's say if we're in 5th position and you want to work on, let's say, A Dorian, as it exists in that position, just hang on to a note. And just trying to hang on and make a melody underneath it. And what you'll find is you'll be forced to do some different things because your habitual fingerings won't work as well. Let's now look at an example for similar motion. I'll go extra slow here because this one can be a little bit complicated at first. It goes like this. So you'll notice the voices are always going in the same direction, but not at the same rate. So the opening move here, we have a 7th, ascending to a 6th, ascending to another 7th, ascending to a tritone, and then a 6th. That's the bottom voice. So that's why this works so well. We have kind of an arpeggiation happening in the bass. Slowly again. Let's try that over a slow groove. Take some time to get that under your fingers, and now let's move on to seeing how we can adapt this to a more lively groove. In order to practice this, just pick an arpeggio. Let's do maybe D major 7 for now, and let's harmonize it with another melody on top that's going in the same direction, but never repeats a parallel interval. So that's an acceptable first move because the bass note is going up by a 3rd, and the melody is going up by a 5th. That's acceptable too. This is going up by a 3rd, this is going up by half steps. That's all good. Same direction, but not the same interval. So this is going up by 5th, this is going up by 3rd. So in the bottom we end up with, and on top we have together. Really beautiful sound. You really get the sound of both the scale and the arpeggio. So try that for yourself. an arpeggio in the bottom, and then harmonize it with the melody on top. Let's look at an example over a 2-5-1 with parallel motion. This example is going to use parallel thirds, and I'm starting on the 7th fret to the 6th fret. This is a very sweet and smooth sounding example here. I'm doing a chromatic move here on the D minor 7 flat 5. I'm going up, then doing an enclosure around the major third of G7, and then coming down to C minor there. Let's hear that over a groove. Now let's see what we can do with that with some different rhythms and some different articulations over a brighter groove. So there I added a note. As a suspension. So these are all the same notes, just different rhythms. So you can always add these half steps. They sound really good, especially with parallel intervals, because it's kind of doubly strong when you do it with two notes. If you want to practice this sound, try taking any scale. Let's do the C minor scale here. And try playing it up and down the neck with a constant interval. So let's do 6th. That's also a really good sounding one. So if I'm starting on 6th, I might try here. So I'm on 5th fret, 4th fret. I'm going to do it with my 2nd and 1st finger. So pick a melody and then harmonize that. And explore. So if you're in a context where there's C minor happening, you can always go through that scale melodically and intuitively. So last but not least, let's look at contrary motion. This one is also kind of a mouthful, so I'll take it really slow. Here's the first move. We're going to start on the E on the 9th fret G string and make our way down. The top melody is going to go. Here's the little mechanism at full speed. So as you can see, the voices are moving in opposite directions, away from each other. That's contrary motion. The lower voice is more chromatic at first, and then ends up resolving that way. And then the top voice goes so much more chromatic towards the end there. So if you put it together, it goes. Very beautiful sound. Let's look at this over some accompaniment. Let's see what we can do with that line when we're in a longer 2-5-1 context. In order to start chipping away at that sound on your own, situate yourself in a key, so for example C major, and just start moving notes away from each other. And then add some chromaticism to see what that generates. So and see what you can harmonize there. Like that could be a B7. See what's happening there? It's kind of nice. And the whole point is that these lines have a life of their own. So pick a scale and just start using your ears to see what note you want to hear next. If you're start here, maybe you want to hear ba ba be be dee, da. And see where your hands take you. This is a great workout for your hands, for your mind, for your musical ear. It's just a great way to explore counterpoint. We covered a lot of ground with these examples, and while you're getting them together and practicing them and trying to incorporate them into your playing, I highly recommend that you do a lot of deep listening in this style. Some of the guitarists that come to mind that are fluent in this style are people like Jimmy Weibel, Ted Green, Lenny Breau, and Johnny Smith. I've made a YouTube playlist that you can go listen to with some of my favorite recordings by these guitarists. A lot of them are near and dear to my heart and have really played a big role in developing counterpoint at the guitar for myself. It's important that, as theoretical and heady as this topic can be, that you get the sound into your ears and that the sound starts leading some of the decisions that you make. What we don't want to do is to just deploy contrary motion or parallel motion mindlessly. We want to understand what these textures can do, how they feel, and how we can use them to make interesting music. What you'll notice with these great guitar players that I've mentioned is that it's truly a part of their style, and it's not always something that they use 100% of the time. This is often something that's used for color or to develop some interest. If you can train your ears by spending a lot of time with the greats like Bach or like the guitarists that I mentioned, and really get the sound of counterpoint in your ear and be able to discern these four motions when you're listening to contrapuntally rich music, you'll find that these heady and sometimes dense concepts that we covered today will start coming out because you'll understand the sound behind all these ideas. Thanks again to Jared for having me as a guest on his channel today. I hope that this video is informative and inspires some new directions in your guitar playing. Have fun.